This is Firebase. I'm your host, Gary French. Welcome to tonight's program. Friends, just when you thought life was sorta, kinda, maybe, cross your fingers, returning to what we old folks used to say was normal, now called the new normal, many people are encouraging all of us in the United States to make a dramatic U-turn. Well, friends, during the last year of President Trump's what I would call enormously successful first term as president, the world experienced, or should I say suffered, a pandemic. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, every one of you knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say pandemic. You know full well what that was all about. The popular comedian and left-leaning talk show host, Bill Maher, who, in my opinion, seems to at times speak with a large dose of common sense, even as a liberal, suggests, now this is from the liberal crowd, suggests that the pandemic was about more than keeping people healthy. Great statement. What happened during those days turned our nation totally upside down. For me, you see what happens when politicians meddle in your life. Anyway, friends, the normal that we say that we used to have was all about personal freedom and choice and getting to live as you desired and you pleased. But the more you and I, free Americans, when we remove ourselves from public policy and we become silent about what politicians say and do and about the laws and the lands, here's what ultimately happens: the less freedom we enjoy. When COVID first hit, and all of us were encouraged to hunker down and just stay at home, you know what we did? We did. We chose to do that. And those dark days felt as if we were living in some kind of end times apocalyptic movie that came straight from Hollywood. Neighbors would wave at you from a safe distance, whatever that safe distance would be. Loved ones were confined to nursing homes and hospitals. They were told that their family members who cared for them were not able to even spend some time with them. Churches closed their doors, and only those who the government deemed were essential were allowed to go outside. Sort of reminds me of when I was a school kid and I had to raise my hand to say, "Teacher, I need to go to the bathroom." And if I was given permission and be a good little boy, I could go. Well, friends, here's what I've learned very quickly. People are tired of being told what to do by so many people that really don't care about them. They're tired of being told where to go, when to go, whether or not they're deemed essential. Well, and now, the U-turn that I made mention of a moment ago. A recent news report on Fox News is warning folks of what they call the Triple-Demic. Let's look at a short clip from that.
Flu season has arrived early and hard this year. Hospitals now face their biggest surge in patients in more than a decade. The triple-demic of the flu, COVID, and RSV is pushing some hospitals to the brink, and some cities are talking about bringing back the mask mandate. Brian Yanis is at the Cohen Children's Medical Center that's in Queens, New York. And what are they going through? Brian, good morning.
Bill, good morning. Well, pediatric admissions here at Cohen Children's Medical Center are up 50%. Typically, they see 200 children a day. Now they're seeing upwards of 300, some with the flu, some with COVID-19, most, though, with RSV, the seasonal respiratory virus that causes trouble breathing, particularly in infants.
Where we can take care of these children inside the hospital, and we've created in additional care spaces another about 75 beds or so. So we're using alternative care spaces. We're using the PACU or the post-op areas. We're using treatment rooms. We're even doubling patients into certain rooms if they have the exact same condition and viruses.
According to the CDC nationally, there's a 66% increase in RSV cases compared to the same time last year. Though cases are trending downward, RSV does not typically peak until January or February. In New York, about 15% of tests are coming back positive. For RSV, that's 3 times as high as the same time last year. The CDC says the flu hospitalization rate nationwide is at a 10-year high. In November, it was 40 times higher than last November, and in a seasonal surge plus the COVID-19 cases, hospitals are dealing with a triple-demic, stretching emergency room resources and causing long wait times. New York Senator and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is calling on the Department of Health and Human Services to do more.
Friends, if all of that is true, then the answer for us is, according to the CDC and the NIH, among so many others, is to mask up or get vaccinated or get another vaccine or wear 10 masks or whatever. I don't know. That brings me to tonight's program. Tonight, we're honored to have somebody that I admire. I consider to be a leader in the stand for common sense from a medical healthcare professional, Dr. Molly Rutherford. She's been on our program before, and she's the one that organized the Kentucky Truth Summit back in October. And I just want to say, Dr. Rutherford, welcome to Firebase. And let me express how much I greatly appreciate you and your stand against this onslaught from the bureaucracy and the overreach of the government.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks for having me.
You know, what's your reaction to that short video? I wanted to put this in our first segment, and that we've got about 5 minutes before the break, but I really wanted to get your response to the beat of the drum of fear of what they're talking about here.
Exactly. I think prior to the COVID pandemic, there was some of that, the fear sells in the media. So that I don't think it was entirely new with the pandemic, but there are some things that are notable that did not happen prior to the COVID pandemic, like the percentage of positive tests for RSV, the number of RSV cases. Those are things that necessarily, they weren't considered newsworthy. So I think, because we were seeing counts every single day during the COVID pandemic of COVID cases and percent positives, it's like they're using that information and they're just shifting it over to these other viruses. When in reality, in the medical field, for example, I do outpatient medicine. I don't work in the hospital, so I can't speak to what is happening in the hospital here locally. I do know we're having a bad respiratory virus season. That is correct. Most of the people that I'm seeing, however, are just having cold symptoms. And when they come in, I don't necessarily test them for anything. In medicine, one of the first things that we learn on our clinical rotations is don't ever do a test if it doesn't change the management. So for most viral illnesses, the expectation or the advice that I would give would be, take some over-the-counter things, get some rest, drink more fluids, and that's going to be my advice regardless of the virus. I mean, there are some cases where if you're high risk, if I know that you have the flu, if I strongly suspect you have the flu, and I catch it early, we might give you some Tamiflu. But this obsession with testing is new with this pandemic.
I think, Dr. Rutherford, I think that's a tremendous insight and a great comment, the obsession with testing. And when they made comment about the RSV was 3 or 5 times higher than it was a year ago, well, of course it is, because they weren't looking for it. They weren't doing that testing and running their statistics. And I couldn't help but think back when I was a kid. My mother, bless her, well, she was a great mom. She would say, son, you get the croup twice a year. And so what they'd do, they would heat up some Jack Daniels, or they'd find some moonshine and they heat it up, put some honey in there or a peppermint stick, and say, drink this. And sure enough, you started and put you to bed. And I don't know if, as a kid, if you were, you were intoxicated and you just slept anyway or whatever. But we overreact to so much stuff today. Don't you find that from a lot of sources happening right now?
Yeah, I do. I think so. And I think, in some ways, maybe it's a positive, maybe it's a sign that we are doing really well as an industrialized nation here. And, we don't have the worries that, say, developed countries have. And so
that's a great point.
It's almost like we're looking for something to worry about or obsess over. I tried from the beginning. I had some videos on my site to try to calm the fear. Once it became clear that, the death rate from COVID was grossly overestimated, I tried to be that calming voice. But it's hard when every single news station, and when you're on the radio, and even the commentators on the radio are saying the same thing, just this fear-based constant message. You have to just not listen, really. I mean, that would be, just turn it off when they start to, when it sounds like they're trying to make you feel afraid.
Yeah, turn it off when they're trying to make you feel afraid. I think that's another great insight right there. It's like, if it sounds like fear mongering, the quick answer is it probably is. What do you think? If you can, and we've only got about 40 seconds before we go to our break. What do you think some of the reason behind that? And I know that's a complicated question with a complicated answer, but on the short answer, what do you think some of the reason for the fear mongering is all about?
I don't know. I guess it could be just basic, like they're looking for clicks, they're looking for viewership, or it could be sinister, like the government has a hand in it, and they want people to be fearful so that they can test, how much we can be controlled. It's probably a combination of both.
Wow. Yeah, I've got to say it like this, Dr. Rutherford. Sister, I think you are just got a lot of tremendous insight, and I really think it is sinister on a lot of things, because the less you and I are involved in our own health care, the more the government will fill that vacuum. Folks, we're talking with Dr. Molly Rutherford this evening. We're talking about some of the reactions to the Triple-Demic. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Firebase. Speaking this evening with, I used to call Dr. Peter McCullough a rock star. I'm going to call Dr. Molly Rutherford a rock star now in the field of medicine. Her insight is tremendous on the COVID-19 and the vaccine, the results of that. Dr. Rutherford, you organized and developed what was called the Kentucky Truth Summit that was held this past October. How did that come about, and what were some of the results of that summit?
Well, I'm part of an organization called the Global COVID Summit, or Pandemic Health Alliance. And there's several doctors, many who have been censored, part of that group. And we've been offering sort of early outpatient treatment from the beginning of the pandemic. You mentioned Dr. McCullough. I know Dr. McCullough. Thank you for what a tremendous compliment to be even compared with him. He is so brave.
I really mean that. I really believe that.
So much so much censorship and just unbelievable. Anyway, so they had been having meetings throughout the country and even throughout the world. And so I contacted Dr. Urso, Dr. Kat Lindley, and said, I want to do this in Kentucky because I have been trying to make my voice heard, and I just keep getting censored. I was censored on social media. I was locked out of Twitter for a long time. I emailed, members of our school board. I tried to get on the public health board here in Oldham County. I tried all of the ways to get through to people, just, I guess, through the system, and it was not working. So we agreed to plan this event in Kentucky. And I reached out to some other people who are pro medical freedom. And I just had an amazing group of volunteers step up and help me organize. I was able to reach out to the doctors and plan all of the talks. And then to some of the vaccine injured people, I had many people I could name by name, but there's just too many. I don't want to leave anybody out, who were so helpful in gathering all of the people involved in that event. And
Dr. Rutherford, you made a great point there about the vaccine injured people, and I just don't want to let that pass. I don't want us to run out of time, but my team and I were there we were the only local on-site news media team that was there, and we still have videos together that we'll be playing over the next several months from that. Some great stuff. But there was something you made mention of, and we're not hearing about what you alluded to, is that the vaccine injured people. I've become more keenly aware of that, and though that information is not being revealed, is somebody cooking the books? Is somebody not wanting that to get out? And as you respond to that, what does it mean to be vaccine injured?
Mm-hmm. I think it is starting to come out. For anyone who did not see the Kentucky Truth Summit, the videos are available on the website as well. It's kytruthsummit.com. You can watch the panels. The last panel was very good, with some vaccine injured people, and Congressman Massey, Savannah Maddox were there for that. So I think it's starting to come out since Twitter has become more free. Dr. Malone, Dr. McCullough are back on Twitter, so there's more information coming out. They can't suppress it forever.
Right.
I think, vaccine injury it's very broad, and it's also difficult to nail down. Like it's pretty obvious. We know, and the CDC and the FDA have now admitted that myocarditis is a specific consequence, a potential side effect from the messenger RNA vaccines. So we know that to be true. And you can prove it if you get the person in, and oftentimes it has to be proven by autopsy. Unfortunately, there was a German study that just came out a few weeks ago of some autopsies, and they were able to definitively say, based on autopsy of the heart tissue, that the vaccine caused myocarditis and then subsequently led to death. So
are we also seeing an increase of certain cancers among people, and like intestinal issues, and just a plethora of problems?
We're seeing an increase in autoimmune diseases. We're seeing an increase in cancers. Again, it's very hard to prove what is actually caused by the vaccine. And then what I'm seeing, just anecdotally, and I know other doctors that are part of my network are seeing, is there seems to be some sort of effect on the immune system. So the people who have been vaccinated, especially multiple times, they are catching COVID over and over again. Whereas those of us that never really had any shots at all, our immunity seems to be holding up. Now, there could be a confounding variable there, because I think people who have gotten numerous shots, like maybe their level of fear was higher, so they are more likely to continue to do COVID testing on themselves, even if they just have, a runny nose. So I hope that those kinds of things are being studied. I hope that what I'd like to see, when the reporters or when the media reports that we're seeing these, record hospitalizations from flu and RSV and COVID, I hope someone is tracking vaccination status of these people that are being hospitalized, because we do know that there's a real mechanism for the immune system to be sort of suppressed from these vaccines. Those papers are out there. Dr. McCullough could probably name all of the authors and quote all of the papers, but my memory is not as good as his. So that's mainly what I've been seeing. Thankfully, I have not been seeing any real severe side effects or adverse events from the vaccine. I did have one patient get AFib shortly after, and she's pretty much convinced that was what caused it. Hard to prove. I didn't report it because I just, again, it's hard to prove. And then I've had people have shingles, Bell palsy, things like that.
One of the things that I saw, and I had worked in the medical field and with mental disorders and alcohol and drug problems and anger management, and did that with the drug program branch in the U.S. Army over 3 nations, and worked at various hospitals and worked in private practice for a while. I got tired of people that were just thinking that medicine alone, and I'm not trying to poo-poo medicine at all, and I'm not one of these anti-vax people. A diabetic needs insulin. I understand that. But when I went into the Army and they gave me flu shots, I immediately got so ill that I had to be hospitalized, and I was hospitalized with bronchial pneumonia. But when people are looking only to medicine, they fail to remember that there seems to be a side effect for everything. And they think that, well, that's not going to happen to me. And then we've seen a lot of people, sadly, family members have lost loved ones because of that fear that you made mention of. In your practice, it may not be so in your practice because you have a unique practice where you see people on a regular basis, and you treat them more like the old country doctor, and I really like that. Are you seeing some people still being directed by fear when they come into your office?
There are a few, not as many. I think my practice attracts people that are more skeptical, maybe, or that are at critical thinking. We never provided the vaccine here in the office. I never thought about even doing that because I knew there would be government red tape involved. And that's why I do direct primary care, because I don't want to deal with that. My patients who ended up getting the vaccine, for the most part, they did it without consulting me first. There were a few people very early on that I said, well, you are high risk. They're saying that it reduces hospitalization and death, but let's check your antibodies first. If you already have immunity, you don't need the vaccine. And that is something that was really troubling to me early on, was how it didn't make sense to me that Fauci and several other people were saying, many experts were saying, even if you've had COVID, you should still get the vaccine. That made no sense to me, especially when many of us checked our antibodies. We knew we had antibodies to the virus. And also the immune system is more complicated than just antibodies. So those of us who know medicine, understand immunology, we knew we didn't need it. And so I kind of knew something was up, that there were bigger forces because of that recommendation.
Yeah, truly bigger forces. I think that's a tremendous insight. And Dr. Rutherford, I think most people that have a strong dose of common sense recognize that as well. Folks, we're talking with Dr. Molly Rutherford here this evening, and when we get back, we'll conclude tonight's program as we're talking about what you can do. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Firebase. What a great joy to be speaking with Dr. Molly Rutherford here this evening. And we've spoken about the Kentucky Truth Summit, and we've talked about the Triple-Demic that we've heard from Fox News. And we've talked about fear and some of the sinister machinations that seem to be going on in our land. And I want to wrap up this evening with just a couple of things. And you alluded to this a moment ago, or I did. I can't remember which one of us was more intelligent in referencing this, but there was a report some time ago that suggested the number of deaths from COVID-19 were not as high as earlier reported. And my question was, did I misread something, or was there, and if that's true, why did we not hear about it?
Right. Well, as usual, if you're watching the mainstream media, you're not getting all of the information. So many of us have learned how to find the information in other places. Substack is a really good resource. There are numerous independent journalists on Substack who don't seem to have, a political affiliation, who are just dedicated to giving truth. And you're talking about, I think, the CDC report, which said that many of the deaths that were coded as a COVID death that was not really the primary cause of death. So It was either the person died and they happened to have an incidental finding of a COVID positive PCR test, which we know those are problematic, because depending on the number of cycles, you can get so many false positives from that. So there was just some dishonesty, and there were financial incentives for people to say that a patient or a person who died had COVID. We all know about that. We've all heard about that, and it's been reported. You can't find it in the mainstream news sources.
Dr. Rutherford, I'm holding some information here. One report, and then this is I don't know how many pages. This almost 60 pages of a legal document that looks like it's the foundation for a lawsuit out of an attorney, Thomas Rentz, out of Fremont, Ohio. Is basically bringing out information about SARS and COVID, and it seems to suggest that there truly was gain of function, that there was some sinister plots going on, and this other report is talking about, yes, people are getting sick, but the CDC is saying, seems to be pushing, we need you to get boosted in your vaccine and continue wearing masks. It's like it's the same old story. What are we going to learn? Are we going to keep on going down that path? And sadly, we only have about 2 minutes.
I don't know. I hope that people have learned not to comply. I don't think in Kentucky we're going to see any mandates, just because of the case that was brought against the governor in 2021. So I don't think they're going to have the legal, they're not going to have any standing to be able to have mandates here. And I just thank God that our country is a republic. If our federal government decided to do something, we still have states' rights. We still have, our attorney generals fighting for us, regardless of party. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just being optimistic. I can't see us going back to mandates. I really don't.
I think you should be optimistic. I am optimistic, and there's a scripture that I love. A couple of scriptures out of the Old Testament. One is when the prophet Elijah stood up against the prophets of Baal, and he was challenging the people, guys. Either Baal is God or our God is God. You got to decide. And the response from the people there in Kings was that, and the people said nothing. They didn't say a word. And I think that's part of the issue is they've got people like yourself and myself that we're taking a stand and we get ridiculed, but then most people refuse to say anything. 30 seconds here and much less than that. Do you think people just need to stand up and let their voices be heard?
Yes, I hope more people will. I know it's difficult for doctors. I sympathize with how they are limited in what they can say because of their jobs. They don't want to lose their jobs, but I hope they can find the courage to just not worry.
Amen. We'll have to let that be the final word right there, Dr. Rutherford. Thanks so much for being with us tonight on Firebase. Thanks for watching this most recent episode. Click below the like button. Provide any comments that you like. Also, we will get back to you as soon as we can after you write to us at P.O. Box 39, Perry Park, Kentucky, 40363. Also, let us know if you like really good coffee, and we'll send that out to you as soon as we possibly can. What's the name of the coffee? Firebase.